It is May 4th, 2024, and welcome to Political Dharma with Alan Zundel. Last week, I talked about how Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said that on Wednesday he was going to give a major announcement. I'll have a story on that as following up, see how major it actually was. Also, some ballot updates for Kennedy in California and Hawaii, as well as Cornel West in Vermont, and Donald Trump accepts the invitation of the Libertarian Party to speak to their national convention, and the Constitution Party nominates for president somebody that I actually have heard of before. A couple other items as well coming up today as I continue this year's focus on the presidential campaigns for non-major party candidates and parties. Also, at the end of this particular episode, I'm going to be talking about the future of this Political Dharma podcast. So I think those of you who have been following me would like to hang around to the end to hear how things are going to be coming up in the next few months and the rest of the year as well. Again, we're going to start off with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the independent candidate for president this year. And he said that he was going to present to New York a major announcement. Last week I tried to speculate on what that would be, and I couldn't have guessed it was this. So I'm going to play some clips. I've boiled down that some 40 minutes of his event into just about a 5-minute video so you can get the gist of what he was saying and what the point of it was. All right, so coming up right now, and here we go.
I've been accused by the press and by President Biden and now President Trump of being a spoiler. So we actually did a poll to test whether that accusation has any basis. And that's the poll that we're going to talk about today. This poll typically costs between $200,000 and $500,000. And it gives us a very, very clear picture of who can win this election and who cannot. And I am going to invite my campaign manager, Amaryllis Kennedy, up to explain this poll to you, and then I'm going to come back and make our big announcement.
Rather than being a national poll, this is a 50-state poll. And the distinction there is that there are respondents across every single one of the states with enough coverage in every state to be able to actually allocate the electoral votes as if the election happened today. If the election were to be held today, and the only two candidates were President Biden and President Trump, this is what CNN's magic wall would look like tomorrow. President Trump wins handily by a 50 electoral vote margin. What is their plan for beating Donald Trump in November? Well, maybe they plan to, weaponize the courts and pull a hat trick and force Trump out of the race. It's unlikely, but let's say they did. What would happen? So we ran that scenario too, and here's what the magic wall and CNN would look like in that scenario. Kennedy wins in a landslide by a margin of 96 electoral votes. I think we can all agree that Trump dropping out is pretty unlikely. So, is there any scenario in which President Trump participates in the election and doesn't win it? Yes, there is exactly one. And that scenario is that President Biden acknowledges that he cannot win, not in a two-way, not in a three-way. We ran them both, and makes good on his 2020 pledge not to seek re-election, and allows Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to beat President Trump and save us all 4 years that we dread.
If I remain in the race and the election was held today, President Trump would win, and President Biden would lose. If I got out of the race and the election were held today, President Trump would win, but he'd win by much more. He'd win by 2 additional states. He would win the state of Maine and the state of Virginia. And so the people who believe that I am spoiling this at this point for President Biden need to look at data. This is the no spoiler pledge, which we're announcing today. This is a pledge that I offer to take if President Biden also takes it. Both parties agree to co-fund in mid-October a 50-state poll with 30,000 or more likely voters, so this is essentially effectively zero margin of error, in October of 2024. The survey will test the results of a head-to-head race, pitting President Biden against President Trump, and a second head-to-head race pitting me against President Trump. Both parties, whoever performs weakest against President Trump in a 2-man contest, will drop out of the presidential race. So this is a spoiler pledge. And by the way, I'm happy to make this same pledge, although President Trump is not a spoiler because he can actually win. But I'm happy to make this same pledge with President Trump because I can do better against President Biden than President Trump can.
So as you can see, the announcement was that they had commissioned, the Kennedy campaign had commissioned a high-quality poll, and it broke down the voters' response, the likely voters' response as to who they would vote for by state, so they could allocate those to individual states and see how the electoral college vote would come out if the election were held today. And if you watched my episode last week, I talked fairly extensively, I think, about that process of the presidential election and the electoral college. But the upshot of it was that if Kennedy stays in the race, they said Biden would lose to Trump. And if Kennedy drops out of the race, Biden would also lose to Trump. But if Biden drops out of the race, Kennedy will beat Trump by a small margin, I think, but he would beat Trump. So he was calling on Biden to accept this spoiler pledge that in October they test this again, and whichever one of them was acting the role of the spoiler to elect Donald Trump, they should drop out. Now, whether you think that's a major announcement or not, well, I'll leave that up to you. It was certainly a clever campaign trick to turn the tables on the Biden campaign, continually saying that Kennedy is the spoiler, but I don't think Biden is likely to fail to run, to drop out of the race because of this. If he drops out, it'll be because of health reasons or his wife pressures him, or probably a combination of the two. If he did drop out, which is still unlikely, the Democratic Party would put up another candidate, I'm sure, and then whether Kennedy would win or not against that candidate, it's hard to say. Probably not, because the Electoral College and the traditional voting of party voters is still enough to overwhelm in the Electoral College. Although I think, as I said last week, Kennedy does have a path if fortune favors him and he plays his cards right. So this is a clever campaign trick, and I thought it at least gives his supporters an argument when people tell them that Kennedy is playing the spoiler and we risk electing Donald Trump, that if you're really worried about Trump, you should be asking Biden to drop out. Good turnaround for Kennedy. Now, what else is happening on the Kennedy front? Well, there was a new nomination. Let me pull this up here. Sorry, I'm still struggling sometimes to get things to work. American Independent Party in California nominated Kennedy for president and will get him on the California ballot that way. Now, previously, Kennedy's campaign had been trying to get voters to register with his We the People party as a means of accessing the California ballot. And of course, California has a lot of voters and a lot of electoral votes. And as you can see down in that last paragraph that I have on the screen, this is the press release from the American Independent Party. It's the second paragraph, excuse me, the middle one. It's the third largest qualified political party in California, although that is only around 3%, I think. The Democrats and Republicans outnumber them. Of course, those who are unaffiliated with the party outnumber it as well. But still getting on the ballot is quite a feat. And I think, I'll save this for a moment. Let me first look a few years back at the Los Angeles Times published a study of this American Independent Party and found that this is in April of 2016, so about, 8 years ago, they found that a lot of the people who had registered with the American Independent Party thought they were registering as an independent and not with a particular political party. Now, this party was founded in order for George Wallace to run his anti-civil rights campaign. Maybe that's an unfair way of putting it, but, I don't know if it's unfair. I think it's accurate, but probably people would object that that's not how Wallace would say it. His was a states' right party, and they were trying to counter the civil rights movement's progress in getting federal support. Anyway, it was George Wallace's party. Over the years, it has, become somewhat of a fringe party, but recently, I guess it had some kind of change. And anyway, the people registering with it, let me continue with this thing. This LA Times article from several years ago saying people registered with that party by mistake. This included Patrick Schwarzenegger, who is the son of the former governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the wife of a Los Angeles City Council person, as well as the future wife of Governor Gavin Newsom, who at the time was lieutenant governor and dating Jennifer, who later became his wife. So as you see, there are politically connected people who all seem to have been taken in by the name and made the mistake. So I think we have the same thing here in Oregon. We have an independent party, and a lot of people register with it by mistake, thinking that's how they register as a non-affiliated voter, non-affiliated with the political party. That's the term we use here. Anyway, this party was founded by George Wallace for his presidential run in 1968, which I also talked about last week because it was the last election in which any non-major party candidate won an appreciable amount of electoral votes. It's ironic, and there's a lot of echoes of 1968 in this campaign. Robert F. Kennedy's Sr. was running for president in that campaign, and of course he was assassinated after the California primary. There was an unpopular president embroiled in an unpopular war. Student demonstrations on campus. At that time, it was Vietnam. Now it's Israel's war on the Palestinian people in Gaza and elsewhere. And the Democrats are going to hold their their convention in Chicago, just like 1968. So anyway, just a lot of echoes there. And it is odd that George Wallace's party should be the one that picks up on Kennedy this year. But Kennedy had something to say explaining that, and I'll play that for you as well. Let me cue it up here, and here we go.
Ironically, the American Independence Party was George Wallace's old party, but it's had its own rebirth even before I came along. It's been reborn as a party that represents not bigotry and hatred, but rather compassion and unity and idealism and common sense. When they learned about my candidacy, they had just drafted a new charter for their reborn party where they could use their ballot line for good, for helping independent candidates to unite America without being blocked by the two-party duopoly. After hearing my interview, they began researching me and our effort, and they found out that we already had thousands of volunteers working across the country in various states, including California, to get me on the ballot. They were so impressed by this outpouring of democratic energy and vigor that they approached my campaign and offered us their spot on the California ballot. That's why it's with a great sense of personal optimism that I proudly accept the American Independent Party's offer of ballot access here in California. It was the scale of your efforts and the depth of your commitment that inspired the AIP to come to me and offer me this easy way to get my name on the ballot for the President of the United States.
So there you have it. The party seems to have changed in recent years, and in fact, let's see, I have some notes on this. With this nomination now, Kennedy has at least fulfilled the requirements for being on the ballot in 10 states. Not all those signatures in other states have been certified yet, but it looks like he could well have 10 states under his belt. The American Independent Party actually succeeded in getting one of its candidates to be one of the top two. Now, they have a system of voting where in the primary, all the candidates run together, and the two candidates who get the most votes go to the general election. And in their assembly, race for the California Assembly, there was one candidate from the American Independent Party who actually made it to the top two and will be on the ballot in November. So they have had a little bit of success, at least in getting one of their candidates forward. They have a whole different approach to their platform and the rest. As Kennedy said, I haven't looked into it very deeply, but interesting developments. Also in Hawaii, let's cue up that one. I said last week that the hearings officer for the Democrats' challenge to the Kennedy campaign getting his We the People party qualified for the ballot so that they could nominate him and get him on the Hawaii ballot, had found against the Democrats and for the We the People party. And this week, the Democratic Party decided it was not going to appeal that decision, which means that Kennedy's place on the ballot in Hawaii is also secure. I also mentioned last week and the previous week as well how Kennedy got on the ballot in Michigan through the nomination of a minor party as well. And as a few people reminded me, that party is the Natural Law Party, not the Natural Rights Party, which I said repeatedly in the last episode, even though it said on the headline that I could see as well as you on the little news article that I put on the screen, that it was the Natural Law Party. Natural law and natural rights are two traditions of political philosophy that, because they sound similar and they've often compared to each other, I get them confused. I studied political philosophy and got my master's degree in it. So anyway, Natural Law Party did nominate Kennedy in Michigan, and now in Florida, the party also apparently is qualified for the ballot as well. This is an article from Ballot Access News, and the Secretary of State in Florida has sent a letter to the officers of the Natural Law Party there saying that it's now qualified for the ballot, which means that they might be able to nominate Kennedy to the ballot as well as their presidential candidate, just like they did in Michigan, which would be a big boon to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. If he got on the ballot that way in Florida, wouldn't have to gather so many signatures. And Florida is another high population state with a lot of electoral votes. So anything else on Kennedy's campaign? I think it's it for that. So let's switch to one other candidate here, Cornel West. He also had some progress in ballot access. He was nominated in Vermont to their Green Mountain Peace and Justice Party. Now this party, this minor party, has a history as well. It used to be called the Liberty Union Party, and it is best known for the fact that this is where Bernie Sanders started his political career. Of course, Bernie Sanders is from Vermont, and he was the party was created in the 1970, and then Bernie ran several times in the early and mid 70s on the party label for different offices, including for governor, which he didn't win. And then he subsequently, around 1977, resigned from the party. He was also state chairman at the time. So he has a history with that. That's what makes that particular party notable. So Cornel West got their nomination, and now Cornel West is on the ballot in 6 states, and those are all pretty secure because in Utah, his signatures were verified, and in the other 5 states, they were all nominations from minor parties, almost all of them, I think, if not all of them, very small parties. So the Liberty Union Party changed its name just recently in 2021 because they thought Liberty Union sounded a little right-wing when really it's a socialist party. I don't know how far left it is. I think it's more of a democratic socialist party along the lines of Bernie, but fits Cornel West, I assume, pretty well. Let's see. Next story up is Donald Trump. Now, one of my stories last week was that the Libertarian Party had extended nominations to Joe Biden and Donald Trump to, it's not coming up here. Let me fix this. All right. Okay. Here we go. The Libertarian Party had extended invitations to Donald Trump and Joe Biden to speak to their national convention at the end of this month. They have also been in talks with Kennedy and have invited him as well. But Donald Trump is the one presidential candidate, aside from the ones running for the Libertarian Party nomination. He's going to be taking that invitation and speaking to them. Now, this has caused a bit of turmoil in the party. Here we have up, again from Ballot Access News, those of you who are watching this as a video form rather than listening to it can see that they confirmed that Donald Trump accepted the invitation, and they're waiting to hear from Biden as well. I would say don't hold your breath. So as I said, this invitation caused a little ruckus within the party, and then the chair of the National Party, Angela McArdle, felt that she needed to go and defend her invitation, her issuing this invitation. So here's some clips from her, from a little video she put on X explaining her decision.
There's going to be a lot of media attention. And the most media attention that we've gotten for our candidates so far has been around, whether or not Kennedy's going to jump in the race. And I know you're angry at me for calling that out. My job as chair, there's 2 things, right? What do? I have to eat shit like I'm doing right now and move things forward. And part of moving things forward is doing what I can to get our candidates as much media attention and publicity as possible. And while you're upset with me right now because you're mad at Donald Trump and you think he's going to steal the spotlight, the entire media apparatus in the United States for politics is going to be, boom, spotlight on us, because he's speaking right after our candidates do. It is the same stage. He's not doing a debate with us. I tried to get that. We didn't get it. He's still coming, and he's joining the stage right after our presidential debate. We will move the Overton window in the direction of liberty, and we will do it without making commitments to nominate anyone or violate our bylaws or do any backhand deals. What have you got to lose? This is the best thing that's ever happened to the party. We get to proselytize a past and potentially future presidential candidate. So let's do this, man. Let's rally together. Let's get excited about this win. And let's reject this Model UN student government loser energy.
Well, that was the national chair of the Libertarian Party, Angela McArdle, but there continued to be dissent within the party, as you can see from this report from the Independent Political Report, that the National Party treasurer had introduced, this is Thursday evening, this person, I think it's man, introduced a motion to rescind the invitation for those non-libertarian presidential candidates. So it continues to be a contentious issue within the party, but I'll be watching, well, I'll be at least trying to monitor what goes on at the convention at the end of this month and let you know what I can find about how things turn out. Let me cut back to myself here. Doing a little better with my right hand. Actually, I'm doing all that with my left hand, but that's getting more skilled as well. Those of you who know, I have my right hand in a splint, but it is getting stronger. And thank you for all your well wishes. So one more minor party to go here, and that is the Constitution Party. I said last week that this is a very small party. I think they have about 12 or 13 states in which they have ballot access right now. And usually they have very minimal impact on the presidential election or any other election for that matter. They are present here in Oregon as well as those other states, whatever they are. It's a party that says that it's devoted to the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, and the Christian Bible. And they try to take their positions based on those documents. I'm not sure exactly how they see them reconciling or synchronizing with each other, but that's what their orientation is. Usually don't have much of a chance of making news, but this year was very interesting. They nominated the candidate last weekend, and that candidate, Independent Political Report again, says that the Constitution Party nominated Randall Terry as its nominee for president. Now, that's a name I have actually heard of. Randall Terry has been around for decades as a anti-abortion activist. He was one of the co-founders of Operation Rescue, which was known for rather controversial tactics, in-your-face tactics, the things that you would hear about, like having the discarded remains of fetuses in a jar and waving it in people's faces. So he's been well known for decades within the anti-abortion movement, or as they call it, the pro-choice movement. The pro-life movement, the pro-life position. Once again, I find myself saying things that I don't mean to say because they are closely related in my mind to something else. So Randall Terry, someone I've heard of, maybe have some impact by getting people who are in the pro-life movement to actually vote for him and take some of those votes away from Trump, from the people that are kind of disappointed in Trump and not backing the pro-choice position more strongly, such as a national ban on abortion up to how many weeks or whatever. But I doubt if he'll have much influence. I just found that interesting that they actually nominated somebody that has some public national profile. Also, let's see, what else? One of my other stories was that Joe Biden had trouble getting on the ballot in a couple of states because the National Democratic Party was holding its convention too late for certain states to certify Biden to the ballot. And the state of Alabama did pass a law this week which changed those deadlines so that the Democrats could get Biden on the ballot in Alabama, even though the Alabama governor who signed the bill is a Republican, as well as there's Republicans dominating the state legislature. But no word from Ohio. That's the one state left, I think, in which they have not approved of Biden being on their ballot because, or they won't be able, Biden's campaign won't be able to get them on the ballot unless there's a law passed extending the deadline for getting him certified to the ballot. Again, that's because the deadline in Ohio for getting a candidate certified to the ballot is earlier than the Democratic convention in which which Biden is going to become the official nominee of the party. And then another thing is that last week, this is again affecting the major party candidates and their race. Last week when I talked about the Electoral College, I talked about how there were two states that rather than awarding all their electoral votes to one candidate, split up their electoral votes, some of the votes going to the candidate who got the most votes across the state, and a couple of electors being nominated because their candidate got the most votes in one particular congressional district within that state. And those two states are Nebraska and Maine. If you're watching this, again, you can see Nebraska there has in the red, that means they voted Republican. There are three statewide electoral votes, and then one of their congressional district electoral votes. All those went to the Republican, but there is one, I think, from a urban area, Omaha, one that went to Joe Biden, the Democrat. And the news was, look on the other side now, and you see the opposite results, which is that Maine in the presidential election last time around and in general awarded its 2 statewide electoral votes to the Democrat, as well as 1 congressional district vote, and the other congressional district vote to the Republicans. So the news was this week that the state of Nebraska has, the governor is pushing the legislature to have a special session in order to change their law to award all of their electoral votes to the candidate who gets the most votes statewide. That is, they would eliminate the likelihood of 1 electoral vote from that state going to the Democrats. And then in Maine, the majority leader of the state house, who is a Democrat, said that she would push through a bill in Maine to do the same thing, to award their electoral votes all to the statewide winner in order to counter what Nebraska is doing. That is, Nebraska was trying to get their 1 Democrat electoral vote awarded to Trump, and Maine said, if you do that, we're going to do the same thing and get our 1 Republican electoral vote awarded over to the Democrats. So a little tit for tat there. Let me look over my notes here. That was from Ballot Access News, was the Arizona one, and this last one was from Politico on Friday was about a week ago, just after I uploaded my last video. I keep looking at my monitor rather than looking at the camera. Sorry if that seems a little rude or disconcerting. That's it for this week. Again, if you like the show, please subscribe and hit the like button. I'm having trouble with this again. Hit the like button, subscribe to the video if you want to get future ones. If you'd like to donate to help the show keep going, you can go to the politicaldharma.com website and hit the button there. That'll bring you to the link for the secure PayPal donation transaction business. Also, I want to talk about what's happening with this show. As I mentioned last week, my wife and I are selling our house and in the process of emptying it out, and we are going to be looking for another house to move into. So there will be times in the next couple of months when I won't have access to my little home studio here at my computer in order to put this thing together the way I have been. What I'm going to try to do when I'm not able to do it at home is to make shorter videos without all the bells and whistles of the graphics and the intro and closing credits, and then just upload some updates. I'm going to try to keep abreast of developments in the alternative candidates for president's sphere and bring those to you, at least in short form, maybe videos from my phone or something like that, uploading. I'm not sure when. I hope on the weekend as usual. It depends on how busy I am at the particular moment. So next month there'll be a couple of weeks, next week and the following week, in which it'll be particularly difficult to make these videos and get them uploaded. I'll try to do what I can to keep things going. I think I'll be able to do one more before we actually make the big move. And then, there'll be another gap in which I have to make do as best I can. And finally, by July, I'm hoping to get back in business and probably shift the emphasis in this show from how the candidates are doing as far as getting ballot access and move it towards the candidates that seem like they'll have the most chance of having an impact on the election, what their positions are, and how they compare to the major party candidates. I managed to get through most of the show without taking a sip of water, but there you go. I didn't make all the way through. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching, and I hope we'll get you something next week as well. Bye.
I see the chains are breaking. We gained our focus. The moves we're making will prove to determine our self-worth as a passenger on this vehicle Earth.